In this video, I will be going over the second Sorcerer origin specialization provided by the player's handbook for the Sorcerer class, called Wild Magic. As in my previous Sorcerer video, the class gets to choose this specialization at first level. It's important to point this out because other classes generally choose their class specialization at later levels, usually between 2 to 4. Whereas the Sorcerer, you're doing this right at the start. To complement the class, and as a counterpoint to the Tiefling I chose in the first video, I've decided to go with the Aasimar race for this particular character. Kind of like a light versus dark theme in this particular case. While an Aasimar is generally geared towards the Paladin and Clerical classes due to their Wisdom and Charisma bonuses, I have chosen to showcase how they can be used for other classes as well. So with that in mind, let's begin the process of creating our character. Once again, I'm going to be using the Character Wizard. And I'm just going to close this out, keep that there for the moment, and keep this here. So the Aasimar is right here at the bottom of the selection screen. Not sure why, seeing as it's generally alphabetically at the top, but this list doesn't appear to be sorted in alphabetical order. So I'm going to choose that, and as you can see right off, we have the dark vision capability. The character is going to be medium build in size. They can move 30 feet in a turn. They understand the Celestial and the Common languages, and they have the Celestial Legacy and Celestial Resistance traits that we'll worry about setting up once we get the character created. Once the race is chosen, you can click this Next button or just simply click on the Stats button in order to get to the actual stats screen. And this is where you get to choose the ability scores, such as your Strength, your Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. Now, a Sorcerer, its spellcasting ability utilizes the Charisma ability score. The one thing that we'll want to keep in mind in relation to our stats, though, is that a Sorcerer requires a pretty good Charisma to be able to ensure that their spells are going to be highly effective. So we'll want to make sure that we get a decent stat for that. By default, when you select the stats screen, or you click Next after choosing your race, the stats that are here will be selected from the standard array, and they're generally arranged in this particular order, highest here, lowest there. I don't typically use the standard array for any of the campaigns that I've run, or any character that I typically create, provided I'm allowed to choose the ability to roll the dice. And because of that, I generally like to click on this little button down here and select the dice roll. And as you can see, as soon as I click on that, I get a roll here. This actually is a pretty decent selection. So I'm going to quickly move these around. I'm going to put the Charisma to there. Constitution I will keep at 16. I will flip these two. And I will keep the rest as they are for now. Actually, having thought on that for a second, I want to be able to take advantage of the Aasimar racial trait where it increases the wisdom by 1 point, and I'm going to simply swap the 11 and the 9 around. That way I get a decent, good average here, and a perfect score almost for what I want for my charisma, and a pretty good score for my constitution. So now that I have the ability score selected, I'm going to move on to the class. And I can, again, just click either the class tab here, or click on the next button. And I'm going to choose Sorcerer. Going to go with, that is actually a good point. I haven't decided my background yet. Give me a moment. I'll be right back. I've decided I'm going to make use of the folk hero background. And you'll see how that ties into it in a little bit. But because of that, I know what proficiencies I'm going to acquire here, and that's animal handling and survival. So I'm going to make sure that I choose Arcana. And let's go with Persuasion. Total counterpoint as to what I had selected for the other race. And then Wild Magic is our specialization. Alright, so that sets everything up for that. Now let's go to the background options here and put in Folk Hero. Okay, I believe that covers everything that I need right now for this. Obviously outside of the tool selection here. Now, an Aasimar, let's see. I'm going to go with the painter's supplies. A little bit of a strange one for me, but yeah, I'll choose that for this particular character. All right, so with all of that done, I'm going to go through the process now of setting up the inventory and the spells. I'm going to start with the spells. In this case, this character is going to acquire 4 cantrips. And I know right now that I'm going to be acquiring the light cantrip fairly early on, so I don't need to choose that right now. I'm going to choose Firebolt. Oops, you don't just click on it, you drag it. Blade Ward, Mage Hand, and True Strike. So that covers off the cantrips. For level 1 spells, I'm going to choose Chromatic Orb, that's always a useful one, and Comprehend Languages because of the potential to be limited on the actual languages that we're going to be able to make use of here. So that takes care of our spells. In relation to the inventory, there are 2 sheets that we're going to want to focus on essentially for building out our starting equipment. The first is on your character class sheet here, and you want to scroll down till you see the Proficiencies title and look at the equipment that's just below it. And in this case, we will see this starting list as well as some quick links in order to get at the tables that we want to look at. The Folk Hero one, and pretty much any background class sheet, will also have it under the Proficiency section. And in this case, it's going to be only a bolded title, not an actual proper title, and will allow you to go through and pick one of these. Now, we've already chosen the proficiency for the tool, so we'll want to make sure that we add that tool in here, which, if I'm not mistaken or recall correctly, is the painter's kit. So I don't know if that actually shows up here. Paint. Nope. Okay, so we'll have to go to the table to get it. That's fine. Let's start with our class sheet first. In this case, I'm going to choose a simple weapon. And you'll notice here that it says any simple weapon. That means it could be a melee weapon or a ranged weapon. So these are the weapons that you can choose in that particular list. I'm going to go trying to figure what she might use or he might use. I'm going to go with a mace. And drop that into place. All right, a component poacher, arcane focus. So as a spellcaster, there are 2 options that you have available to you, depending on how the DM is going to be controlling their campaign. Some DMs will require spellcasters to use components, which means you have to have the money to buy them, etc., etc. Others will allow a caster to use an arcane focus, and others will mix the 2. I will generally allow spellcasters to use the arcane focus, and if they wish to use components. So I'm sort of in the 3rd category, if you will. But generally, most of my players will use an arcane focus. So with that, I'm going to very quickly pop open I believe it's adventuring gear. Yeah, arcane focus. And in this case, I'm going to choose a crystal. And that should be under gear. And there we go. Okay. Dungeoneer's pack or an explorer's pack. I generally am more in favor of the explorer's pack. So I'm going to select that as well. And then 2 daggers. So let's go here, daggers, choose that, drop that into place, and update the number here to 2. All right, and that takes care of everything that's on the equipment portion of our class sheet. But we're not quite done, and you don't want to close this class sheet out just yet. The next thing we want to look at is a set of artisan's tools. So that's going to be under the tools link here. And I chose the painter's kit, and I'm just going to drag and drop that into place. A shovel, that I also believe is possibly under tools. Nope, that's going to be under adventuring gear then. Yeah. Okay. An iron pot. Let's go here. Pot. Iron. common clothes, and I want common here, and then a belt pouch. Now, if you look for a belt pouch, you're not going to find it, so you have to just simply look for pouch, and there's the component pouch if you decide to go with that particular route. And I've chosen a pouch here just to represent that the particular character is going to store their coins, if you will, in that pouch. With that, the only thing left is to choose a name. We don't get to choose any feats here because this character is level 1, and feats don't really come into play until most characters hit level 4. In addition, I don't think this is actually complete yet. I'm not entirely certain whether the feats function even works. So with that, I'm going to choose a name, and this is the Wild Magic. Yep. Wild Magic Sorcerer. And then I'm going to click this Save button. And what this will do is actually go through and create our character sheet for us. Nice and convenient, but there are a few issues with it. The first thing to notice is that our saving throw proficiencies have not been set. In the case of a sorcerer, it's your constitution and your charisma. So you'll just want to make sure that you click this star here next to the saving throw and actually ensure that it is set to proficient. So in this case, that's proficient and that is proficient. The next thing that's going to happen is that your spell casting spell slots won't be set. I'm going to just quickly clear that out. Your spells will be populated here, but they won't necessarily be set in the preparation table. So you'll want to go to your class sheet and pop open the spell casting capability here to get to your table. But at the same time, you're going to want to go and scroll up in your class sheet to get at the spell slots per spell level table that is listed here. At first level, that is 2 spells. So we want to make sure that we have 2 spell slots, which is this column here. And make sure that we put a 2 in this column here. Pact Magic is for an entirely different class, so it's not something you have to worry about here. So with that, we'll keep this open. I'm going to close this. We don't need anything here for now. Yeah, we don't need anything there. And I'm going to pop open the spellcasting table, and the rest I can close. Sorcerers, as they level up, only acquire new spells at certain levels. So early on, you're gaining a spell per level, but at later levels, you're not. You're essentially skipping every other level in order to learn the next spell, if you will. And that's one of the areas where they differ. The other area that they differ in is in relation to their actual fonts of magic. So one of the abilities we will have to go through and set up is this font of magic capability, and we'll get to that here in a second. So with that in mind, I'm going to keep this Aasimar sheet open here because there's a couple of things that we'll need to look at. I just want to test to make sure that our abilities are actually properly linking. But before I get to that, and before I move on to anything else, the last thing I want to do is set up the portrait. So I'm just going to quickly choose an Aasimar portrait here. And of course, they don't really have one. Okay, so it's under Other. Yeah, we'll go with that for now. All right, so our abilities are all going to fall under this Abilities tab. And as you can see, there's quite a few of them here. Some have come from our background, some have come from our class, and some have come from our race. And typically, anything that comes from the race is classified as a trait, whereas anything that comes from the background or the class that you've selected is a feature. So one of the issues that has been occurring up till now, and that's primarily because the character creation wizard is still new, is that when you click on this, it used to actually show you the Aasimar race sheet, which it is in fact doing, despite the fact that it's showing that the title is this. So that is still a bit derpy. That is fine. I've got this open here, so I can just quickly pop this open and this open. So we'll deal with these two things first. The first thing we'll deal with is the Celestial Resistance. And what that gives you is resistance to necrotic damage and radiant damage. Well, one of the things about Fantasy Grounds is that you can actually go through and create an effect that will allow you to actually pre-configure that so that you don't have to worry about it. It'll automatically be calculated once it's applied to your character. To do that, it needs to be in your Actions page here. So I'm just going to drag that into place. And by default, it will show up under Powers. And to help players understand where things are coming from, I like to recommend that you set the group here to be equal to where the source ability came from. So in this case, it is an Azamarian trait, so I'm going to make sure that I put it under an Azamar subtitle. S-I-M-A-R. There. Now you'll notice that there is no default effect here. Well, that's because you got to set it up in this particular case. So you'll want to right-click on this line here. It doesn't matter where. And you can do it over here. You can do it over here. It'll pop up this radial menu. We want to add an action, and we want to set an effect. So we want to be able to add a new effect to this particular character. That's going to expand out this particular ability, if you will, and provide an empty effect entry that we have to add this stuff to. So typically, when you click on this magnifying glass, it will pop open a sheet like this. And what we want to do is call it Celestial Resistance. Semicolon, capital letters resist, colon, and then the two types of damage. So it's necrotic, comma, radiant. And that sets it up so that our character will be resistant to necrotic and radiant damage. And that should be on self, and it never expires, so you don't need to set a round or an expend duration. Well, you might be asking, how does that now actually get used? Well, what will happen is when you get into a situation where you're going to be under a combat scenario or typically a dice roll required scenario, you'll generally be added to the combat tracker, at least in any campaign that I will run. And as you can see here, we've got our wild sorcerer already in the actual combat tracker. When you are added to the combat tracker, the first thing you as a player should do is immediately click the effect. And what that does is it will apply that effect to your character. So now, if you take any necrotic damage or take any radiant damage, you will be resistant to it, and therefore it should reduce the damage by half. So we can easily actually test that. I've set up a wraith in here, which will do necrotic damage if they touch you. And I'm going to target our lovely wild mage. In fact, actually, I need to move the active character to the wraith. So now I'm going to target the wild mage. When I do that, the first thing that I'm going to do is execute my attack. In this case, that is a hit. But when I execute damage, you will see partially resisted here, which is actually good because I rolled 9 points of damage. Ouch. Actually, I rolled 18 points of damage, so I essentially took half. That tells me that the necrotic resistance is working. Excellent. The same thing should apply for radiant. So that takes care of celestial resistance. In relation to celestial legacy, this spell works very similar to the tiefling legacy that allows you to actually get a number of spells per level, at certain levels, I should say. So you're going to start off with gaining the Cantrip spell. So I'm going to quickly drop that down. And in this case, it's, sorry, not the Cantrip spell, I should say the light spell. I'm going to drop that into place and put that there. We will not be able to select another one until we hit level 3. At level 3, we can now add lesser restoration spells. I have no idea why I'm having such an issue talking today, but hopefully you'll get some entertainment out of this. And then again, at 5th level, we will be able to have the ability to cast Daylight. And once again, it looks like you will have to have a long rest in order to be able to make use of it. So we'll want to make sure we set that up. I didn't notice whether that was actually required for the previous one. So if I fail to set that up, I apologize now. So, in relation to the cantrip, however, you can cast it as many times as you need to. That's what a cantrip does. And that takes care of all of our racial traits that we need to go through and set up. So I'm going to close that out of the way, move this up to here so that my class specialization is usually where I put it. And I'm going to leave this sitting here so that I remember to look at it once we hit level 3. So, the next thing we'll want to make sure that we look at is our features. And that includes our Sorcerous origin, which we have already chosen. That's wild magic. We will also want to make sure that we open up Tides of Chaos, Wild Surge, and Rustic Hospitality is from our background, so I'll want to go over that as well. In relation to Rustic Hospitality, you don't really have to make use of this particular feature from an ability sheet, or from your Actions tab, I should say. Essentially, it's a role-playing thing that allows you to find a place to rest and recuperate, essentially with people that are just on the street, if you're in a city or something along those lines, or if you happen to be walking past a hovel on a road, you can stop in and see if they'd be willing to provide shelter for the night, that kind of thing. In relation to Wild Surge magic, you're going to run into a situation where when you cast a spell, the Dungeon Master is going to make you roll a d20. On that roll, if you happen to roll a 1, you get to make use of this particular table here. I generally recommend that as a player, you link this feature to your actual Actions tab, and not because of any reason as to what we're going to be able to do with it, but to remind yourself that you need to do things. So I'm going to set this to group and do this. This is going to be Wild Magic for the group, and that will put it down here. Essentially, what you want to do is create an effect and do this. This will be Wild Surge. Excuse me. And d20 on a 1, roll against the Wild Magic Surge table. And that should be on self. And it should expire on next roll. The reason why you want to do that is as follows. Now that this effect is here, I'm going to click it and apply that here. Then I'm going to roll a d20. So it's going to be a 4. But you're reminding yourself right here that you need to roll against the Wild Magic Surge table if you roll a 1. And there should be an extra space in there, actually. Against the Wild Magic Surge on a 1. Okay, so there is. It's just not displaying it right there. Not because of the fact that it will automatically do it. In fact, there is no way for an effect on a spell to automatically roll against a table. Now, let's say that that 4 actually was a 1, and I have cast my spell. Well, what I then want to do is click on this particular table here and simply click this roll button. It will automatically roll against it, figuring out all of the individual effects, if you will. And you don't have to worry about the dice. But if you want a custom Wild Magic Surge table, then you would have to potentially create your own table here. Now, I rolled a 26. Well, 26 is an eye appears on your forehead for the next minute. During that time, you have advantage on wisdom perception checks that rely on sight. Well, for the next minute, you can now apply a brand new effect to you that essentially states you are gaining advantage to wisdom, or in this case, perception checks. That is something you could potentially add here as a legitimate effect to actually go and apply to your character. You'll want to look through this table and see if there's anything there that you can actually go through and add as a convenience factor. Because right now, you have to remember manually that you have that advantage for the next 60 seconds. If you don't remember that, I as a DM are going to penalize you for that. I'm essentially going to say, oh, sorry, you missed it. Or you delayed a little bit too long, therefore you're not going to get the roll. Those will be the things that some DMs will do. And the stricter the DM, the more they're going to want you to be accurate on remembering stuff like that, and the less likely they're going to be willing to actually backtrack in those kinds of things. So that is something that can be done. So let's use this as an example. I'm going to create an effect here. Edit that one. And Wild Magic Surge. And that should be semicolon. Advantage on check. And that can be wisdom. Or another way that you can do that is advantage on skill. Oops. And go perception. Either one of those should work. And I'm going to leave this as perception. That's going to last for 1 round, or 1 minute in this particular case. 1 round in the case of combat is a minute. It is going to be on yourself and yourself alone. And it doesn't expire. You can roll 10 different perception checks within that 60-second period, as long as the DM allows you to do it, and all of the advantage checks will apply to it. Okay, so let's add that effect. I now have that there. I'm going to go and roll a perception check, and let's see if that actually works. And as you can see, it rolled 2 dice. It also gave me a green indicator here, indicating that it was an advantage check, and you can see that because it dropped a 14. That is working the way that I want it to. So you can actually go through and preload a lot of the positive and negative effects that are codable on this particular skill here, so that you don't have to worry about trying to remember all of the elements about it, or all of the aspects that you have to deal with here. You just have to click on the effect, put it into place, and then make your roll, and you're good to go. Now, this particular sheet is something that you're going to refer to quite a bit. More specifically, this particular table is something that you're going to refer to quite a bit as well. So out of convenience, it actually also makes sense to set up and drag this onto your quick bar here, so that all you have to do is simply click it, and it will open and close that particular sheet. As a wild mage, you'll be using this table quite a bit if you're in my campaigns. Almost every spell you cast, I will be asking you to roll a d20. Another way that you could actually do that, instead of setting up this particular effect here, is simply put a quick roll option here. So all you have to do for that is this. All I've typed in is /die and then a d20 here. And I can drag that text right over into one of these quick bars. Now if I click that, it's going to roll that d20 for me. Okay, that's a 9. That's a 12. So far I don't have to worry about any effects occurring on my spells. Getting closer though, that's a 3. There's a 7. But as you can see, it makes it nice and convenient for you to actually go through and make that roll. So in some cases, I would recommend this. This, however, would be the way that I recommend you make use of that. So I'm going to delete this particular sub effect, if you will. Leave that there. Now let's say that I did roll a 1 here. All I do is I click open this table, click roll, and I get my effect. Oh my. You turn into a potted plant until the start of your next turn. While a plant, you are incapacitated and have vulnerability to all damage. If you drop to 0 hit points, your pot breaks and your form returns. Okay, so it's a little bit of extra setup there to do that, but that is something that can be done. And I've shown you some of the basics. There is an effects reference sheet that you can look at, and I will try to remember to include that in the description of this particular video, so that you can actually go through and look over the options that you have available. So that takes care of Wild Magic Surge. So I'm just going to shrink that for a moment, close the combat tracker down for a second, and then we're going to take a look at Tides of Chaos. So with this one, your magic has gone completely wild, and it gives you the ability to get a little bit of control over chaos. You will gain advantage on 1 attack roll, 1 ability check, or 1 saving throw at any moment that you choose to do so. But once you've chosen to do so, you will now have to take a long rest before you can regain this particular feature. With a catch. If I, as the DM, now ask you to roll against whether you're going to have a sudden surge with that particular spell, you regain the use of that ability. So there's a little bit of automatic preparation that we can set up, but there's also a little bit of you got to remember that if you're being asked to roll on an actual surge attempt, that you can re-enable that ability if you've used it. So we can short circuit this by actually adding it to our sheet here. Now this came from our Wild Magic specialization, so I'm going to throw that down there. Wild Magic. And once again, as you can see, it doesn't have anything set up. But we can preload the attack roll, the ability check, or the saving throw options here. So I'm going to create 3. Actually, no, we can do this in 1. So this will be Tides of Chaos. Chaos, semicolon. Advantage on attack, semicolon. Advantage on save, semicolon. And advantage on check. EHK. That is going to be on you, and it's going to expire on your next roll. Well, how does that get used? Well, there's one other thing we have to do, preparation. We get 1 use daily. So you'll want to make sure that you set Tides of Chaos to be a 1 use daily thing. Now if I go to action, or combat and action, you will see this little pip here. What'll be required of you as a player is when you click this effect to apply it to your character and actually make your roll, you then need to click this pip so that it goes away to indicate that you have actually used it for your day or between your rests. What I can do as a DM is, let's say the party has gone through and done a short rest. You'll see that that ability is not coming back. But if I execute a long rest, it returns to use. That takes care of the use between rests capability. Well, what happens if you've gotten a surge check and you're now going to be able to make use of that particular feature again? All you do is you go back to preparation. Summary, and you should be able to actually, there it is. It's under standard. You should be able to see the check mark that's here. Simply click that, and now when you go back to actions, it will be there again. Had myself confused for a second there. So how does this actually work in a situation? Well, let's pop open the combat tracker again, and I'm going to get rid of these other effects. I'm then going to apply this particular effect here. Now, if I make an attack against something, I've already got the Wraith targeted, you should see that I'm rolling with 2 dice. Well, that tells me that the effect was working because it's now also gone. If I add the effect again, and then I go make a saving throw, so go over to here, and let's say I'm making a Constitution saving throw, something isn't working right. So I probably have something wrong there, and we'll take a look at that. It also didn't go away, so I can make that adjustment here in a second. Well, what about the advantage to the check there? Does that work? Yes, that works. So it just simply means that I might have something wrong with the advantage to the saving section here. And I do. I can see it right now. It's because I put ADT. Not sure why. It should be ADV. There we go. Now if I apply the effect again, the fixed up effect, and go back and make a saving throw, I rolled a 20. Excellent. So now I can see that the advantage check is there in all 3 of those cases, and the fact that it's going away tells me that this thing is working. And then all I do is select that. I've now used it. I now need to make a long rest in order to actually get that ability back. So just let me quickly clear that on the DM screen. And that is how you use Tides of Chaos. In relation to this Sorcerous origin sheet, it's just a summary of what options are available to you from the specialization options. So in this case, it's Wild Magic as well as Draconic Bloodline. I've already done Draconic Bloodline in a previous video, and this is the one about the Wild Magic one. In addition, it tells you what levels you're going to gain your next features at. So we'll get Band of Luck here at level 6, Controlled Chaos at 14, and Spell Bombardment at level 18. And that's it. That completes pretty much everything that you have to do for level 1. The only thing that I would recommend as a DM is that you go to your inventory sheet and organize this a little bit. If you want to see how to do that, go ahead and watch the previous video. But in general, all you really need to do is, oops, that should be backpack, not backpack. Go into each of these sections here and essentially type in or start typing in the second location field here, this location column that we have here, where a particular item is going to be placed. So anything that should be in your backpack should always be in your backpack. Anything that you're wearing should be in an equipped state, such as weapons, daggers, stuff like that. Armor should be equipped. Your backpack is technically equipped, but really what you're doing is carrying it. And you'll notice that when I actually change the state on the backpack, any item that is within the backpack also has its state change. That's why it makes it nice and convenient. But we forgot to actually go through and set up our treasure tags here. So let's PP, PP, GP, EP, SP, and CP. And I'm just going to quickly go to the background here and add the missing gold. I think it was 10 gold. Okay. Inventory and 10 gold pieces. And that's it. That's everything that you need to do for your first character, for your first level. This character is now ready for use. So we can now begin looking at what happens when you level up this character. Well, there are two tables that are going to come into play. The first is the summary table for your Sorcerer. It's going to give you a listing of any proficiency bonuses you're going to gain and at what level, your sorcery points that you're going to gain and at what level, the various features that you will acquire and when, as well as when you get an increase in your total number of cantrips, discounting the fact that you already have one extra cantrip. So as an Asmar, we got this Celestial Legacy, which gave us the option to choose another cantrip. The way I interpret that as a DM is that you get to have 4 starting cantrips plus any cantrips that are associated with a feat or trait that you have acquired. So that's why we have 5. So even though it says 4 here, we have the 5th one because we got it from our trait. The second table that you want to look at is going to be your spell slots per spell level table. And that is when you're going to acquire a new spell that you know, as well as a new spell slot that you can make use of. So when we upgrade to level 2, for example, we're going to have the ability to choose one more spell. Well, that spell has to be within the levels that we know. At this point, we only know level 1, which means that I'm only going to be able to choose an additional level 1 spell. When I get to the 3rd level, I now have the ability to learn an additional spell. At that point, it becomes an option to choose either a level 1 spell or a level 2 spell. It's entirely up to you, but keep in mind that there is a limitation to how many spells a sorcerer is going to be able to learn. Unlike a wizard, you don't really get a spell book. With a wizard, you get a spell book and could potentially go through and copy new spells into your known spells list, as long as it doesn't exceed the total number of spells you know. And that's where this comes into play. Whereas with a sorcerer, you are literally limited to just knowing an X number of spells. So if you decide to choose a level 1 spell here, you then have to sacrifice at some point another level spell. So I would be sacrificing the ability to cast level 2 spells, or until I get to level 4. Or have to choose that I can only sacrifice a level 3 spell when I get to level 6, that kind of thing. So those are the kinds of things that you have to consider. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't cast that spell at that spell level. So if you want to cast Chromatic Orb as a level 3 spell, when you're at 5th level, you can do so. You have that ability to do so. So that's how that works in this particular case. So with that out of the way, let's actually go through the process of applying level 2. I'm just going to drop that into place. I gain 1 additional spell, so I'm going to quickly switch to my Actions tab here, minimize this so that I have room on the sheet to drop this spell into. You'll see that we now have 3 spell slots, and I'm going to go with Magic Missile. Other things that change at level 2 is that we're going to acquire our Font of Magic use, as well as our 2 sorcery points. These 2 are technically linked. So Fonts of Magic is right here at the top. Just pop that open. So one of the things I didn't point out in the previous Sorcerer video was how do you actually make use of the feature of Font of Magic itself, outside of the use of the sorcery points. Well, there's a couple of things that you can do. You can gain additional spell slots by sacrificing sorcery points. So if you sacrifice 2 sorcery points, you can actually gain an additional 1st level spell slot. It would mean you wouldn't have any Fonts of Magic that you could actually make use of, but it would give you the ability to cast another spell at level 1. The same can actually be said in reverse. If you want to gain more sorcery points, you can sacrifice a spell slot to actually gain 2 points, or 3 points, or 5 points, depending on the level of the spell slot you've sacrificed. But most people are going to use this in conjunction with the Metamagic feature that we're going to acquire at 3rd level. So I'm going to set that up in preparation for that. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to drag this onto our Actions tab, set this back to Group, and this comes from the Sorcerer group. Sorcerer. And it will show up here. Right now, we have 2 points that we can use. So I have 2 uses that I can use daily. And you are required to do a long rest in order for you to regain these points. So you can't take a short rest and get 2 points back. It is always when you make a long rest. That's what this is for. Now, if I decide to expend those 2 sorcery points, they're now gone. But I can now potentially modify the fact that I want to add another level here in my 1st level spell slot section. Or I can undo one that I've already expended. Essentially, it's an easier way to do it. That way you don't have to modify, go back to preparation, modify this number, and go back. Here, you're essentially regaining the ability to use an expended spell slot that you've already used. Easy way to do that. Now, as a DM, when I execute the long rest on that particular character, the Fonts of Magic come back. If you haven't burned through all of your Fonts of Magic, this doesn't go away. It only goes away after you've used up all of the available points. So you don't have to worry too much about that. That is essentially how Font of Magic is used, and that actually completes everything we need to do for setting up level 2. For level 3, we are going to acquire our Metamagic capabilities, and we get to choose 2 of them at the start. We will have an increase in our total sorcery points, and this will be systemic across all of the levels as we go forward. So at this point, unlike the previous video, I'm not always going to point out in the table of contents that I'm increasing the sorcery points. I will do it immediately after adding the level. We are not gaining any additional proficiency bonuses. We are also not gaining any additional cantrips. We are gaining our 1st, 2nd level spell slot. So let's drop the level into place. So you want to make sure that you're on the main tab and just simply drag and drop this icon onto here. I'm now going to go and modify my Fonts of Magic. There we go. And then I'm going to prepare this sheet here so that I can drop another spell into place. Interesting. That didn't do that before. Let's see, can I expand that out? Sure. So there's been a fix apparently that now automatically rescales this particular screen. Okay, let's see what happens when I drop a level 2 spell onto the tab here. Gonna go with Hold Person. Excellent. Okay, so it's dropped in the right spot. That takes care of our spell, and that takes care of our sorcery points. Let's take a look at Metamagic. So with Metamagic, you gain the ability to modify a spell as you're casting it, if you will. So you can be very careful on how you cast that spell. So if you were casting a fireball, for instance, and you happen to be doing so in close proximity to your party members who are down in melee range of the creature you're casting the fireball at, you could select all of your party members up to and equal to the number of charisma's bonus points that you acquire, or that you have, I should say, and select that number of people. So in the case of this particular character, that bonus is 4 points. That means I can choose 4 people that will take or make an automatic saving throw to the save of that fireball, which means they will automatically take half damage as opposed to all damage, or the potential of all damage. But there are also other options that you can make use of. I've already covered these in the previous video, so I will make sure to link that in this description. There is a table of contents there, so you should be able to jump right to the sections. And that way I don't necessarily have to go through and explain each of these twice, now that there's a nice convenient jump to loop within these videos. So with that, what I do want to do is make sure that I'm going to have a reference point for that here. So I'm going to expand Sorcerer, drop that there. Now it's not going to drop into the Sorcerer category because it's not preset to be linked to that category. I'm also going to make sure that in brackets I put the name of the Metamagic option that I have chosen, and you get to do 2 of one of these. So your options are Careful Spell, Distant Spell, Empowered Spell, Extended Spell, Heightened Spell, Quickened Spell, Subtle Spell, or Twinned Spell. You get to choose 2 of those, and then you can begin to make use of that using your sorcery points. So I'm going to start with Twinned Spell right off for this particular character. So Twinned Spell. And then for simplicity's sake, oops, I got to hit enter on that first. There we go. There. Now, for simplicity's sake, I'm just going to simply open this one up here because it's already been modified, and drop it right back into there, and it's automatically going to drop right into the sorcerer group. All I have to do is modify this particular name here. So let's see. I'm going to do Quickened Spell. All right. And that sets up Metamagic for this particular character. We get to do that again at level 10 and a few other levels down here. I think level 17 is the last one. So we get 2 additional choices that we can make. So you get a total of 4. In reference to our Celestial Legacy, we are also gaining the ability to now cast the Lesser Restoration spell. So I do not believe that that is a sorcery spell. I believe that is actually a clerical spell. Possibly? Yeah, it is a life domain spell. Druid, Paladin, Ranger. This is why Aasimar are generally classified as a Paladin or clerical type of creature. I'm getting this spell kind of as a bonus, if you will, when it comes to the fact that we're not using an Aasimar as a Paladin or Cleric, but we're using them as a Sorcerer. I'm going to drop this into place. And that should have... What level is this? Level 2, so it should have dropped up under level 2. There we go. So it's there. Now we have the ability to use that. Excellent. And that completes everything that we need to do for level 3. Level 4 is where we're going to acquire our first ability score improvement. Still gaining points. we are going to gain another cantrip capability, and level 4 is going to see an additional spell learnt, and we can choose either a 1 or level 2 spell. So I'm going to drop this into there to level up. Quickly modify my font of magic. That will be 4. And then add my next spell. And in this case, I'm going to choose Misty Step. As a DM, that spell irritates me to no end. But as a player, I love that spell. Anyway, so in relation to ability score improvements, there are 3 options that you may have available to you. 2 are guaranteed. 1 is dependent entirely on the Dungeon Master. Your 2 guaranteed options are, the first option, you have the ability to take 1 ability score and increase it by 2 points. Your second guaranteed option is to take 2 ability scores and increase each of those by 1 point each. So what I mean by that is, in your first option, you could take that strength ability score that's there and increase it to 14. The second option would allow me to, say, take my charisma and increase it to 20 by 1 point, and then add that extra 1 point to, say, my wisdom to bring it up to an 11, so that it's equal with my intelligence. There is a catch, though. You cannot naturally modify an ability score past 20, so I would not be able to apply that plus 2 points to my charisma. I wouldn't be able to make that choice because I cannot increase that past 20. I can increase it so that it is equal to 20, but I can't go past that. Now, anyone who has watched previous videos know that that statement I just made is partially invalid, because some classes at the highest level you can get to, which in this case is level 20, do allow certain ability scores to be modified above that point, but that's defined by that particular class. By default, and the bulk of the other classes that are out there don't typically have that. So you are pretty much stuck with going up to level 20, unless your class happens to be one of those classes that allows you to go through and do that. This particular class does not. It doesn't allow you to increase past 20. There are no features or traits that you gain that do that. The third option is completely dependent on the Dungeon Master and whether they are going to allow you to make use of it within their campaigns. That option is feats. And that is, click under this option here. There are a large number of feats that you can choose in place of your ability score improvements that would give your character additional abilities. For example, Lucky would allow you to re-roll 3 times before you couldn't do so before having to have a long rest or a short rest. I believe it's a long rest. Yeah, you must long rest. So it's a long rest. That can be considered overpowered in some cases because you're pushing or putting you yourself or the Dungeon Master in a position where you're now having to re-roll an attack roll or damage. So you could potentially make use of a luck point to eliminate the fact that the boss that you're fighting just rolled a critical hit against you. You could have that boss re-roll that d20, and you get to choose which one that particular boss mob actually hit you with. So if they rolled a 20 first, you used a luck point to force them to re-roll that attack roll, and they got a 2, you could select the 2. That's how that worked, or that works. But there are plenty of Dungeon Masters out there that think feats can be considered overpowered. They give you too much of an advantage. I'm on the fence. I've seen the arguments both ways. So I will personally allow players to choose feats within the campaigns, unless I'm specifically setting up a campaign to not do so. But generally, I'm allowing a player to use a feat. In this particular case, though, I'm going to take this character and I'm going to max out the charisma skill. And the reason being is I want to be able to ensure that I have my maximum bonus possible prior to any magical adjustments that could potentially increase this charisma past 20. And I'm going to bring my charisma up 1. And that sets me up for some of the additional ability score improvements that are coming down the line here. So I now have a 17 there and a 20 here. The only thing I have left to do is choose the cantrip. I'm going to quickly expand this, swap over to here. Cantrips, I'm just going to make sure that's expanded. What do I have? I'm going to go with Minor Illusion. Okay. So, I am now ready to look at the next level. So at level 5, we see our first blank entry here for our feature. Typically when you see that at later levels, it means that you're gaining an additional spell slot. Not all the time, but generally. In addition, we're seeing our first proficiency bonus point increase. Our font of magic is increasing. Our cantrips are staying the same, and they will now until we hit level 10. But we are gaining our first 3rd level spell slot. So let's drop this into place. So drop that into there. Deal with the font of magic. Now 5. And in case you haven't guessed, this will be equal to your level. Level 5. Our skill points have gone up, or proficiency, I should say. So our saving throws have improved, as well as any skill that we're proficient in will have improved. So the bonus that is here will have improved. We still have our skill to worry, or our spell to worry about, but nothing else here has to be dealt with. So let's go and choose our first level 3 spell. And anyone who has watched my previous videos knows what I'm going to choose right now, and that is going to be Fireball. Okay, there we go. So that is now taken care of. Our last Celestial Legacy gain here at level 5 is that we can now cast the Daylight spell. And again, this is not something that we would normally gain the ability to make use of, unless we decided to choose it as part of our list of sorcery spells. I'm just going to drop that into place, and I'm pretty certain that is a level 3 evocation, so it should drop into the level 3. Yep, there we go. Spell slots there. That gives us the ability to now essentially close this particular page out, but I'll do that here in a moment. That actually completes level 5. Level 6 is going to see our next Sorcerous origin feature apply, which is in this case going to be Bend Luck. So I'm going to pop that open. We are also going to get an additional spell that we need to learn here, but it's only going to be up to a 3rd level spell. And other than our font of magic increase, there's nothing else that we're going to be gaining. So let's drop that into place. All right. Deal with the font of magic increase. Sorcerer, preparation 6. And choose another spell. Minimize that. Go with Lightning Bolt. Okay. And then we'll take a look at Bend Luck here. With Bend Luck, your Chaos Magic is coming into play here again. And what you have the ability to do is expend 2 sorcery points, which by this time you've had 6. Whenever a creature that you can actually see and is within range of you begins to roll an attack roll, an ability check, or a saving throw, you can then roll a d4 die and have that either added or subtracted to that roll. So if in the event it is an enemy creature, you can subtract that d4 from that particular character's roll. If, however, it is a party member and you want to give them a little bit of a push in the event that they're making a very critical saving throw, you can add the total that you acquire from that die roll to their saving throw to see whether they succeed or fail, and hopefully they've passed. You get to choose whether it's a bonus or a penalty. Now, the one thing about it is that you can choose to make this roll after that particular creature or player has rolled, but before the effects are defined. So if someone has played out their saving throw roll and they have failed by 1 point, you could make that roll and potentially allow them to succeed before the DM comes in and says, this is what's happened. So you get to know what the success or failure rate of that particular roll is before you make the decision. Generally. There are some situations where it could be argued that you cannot. And those situations would really be discussed at the time that they're happening. But the DM is still going to want to know that you're making use of that capability. So you're going to want to add it to the Actions tab and put it under the Wild Magic section so that it's grouped with your other class specialization features. So if I expand this out, it should now be in here. And all you really need to do for convenience sake is essentially create a quick 1d4 die roll drop and then just drop it onto your quick bar. That way you can just quickly do that and essentially say, I'm using this, I'm rolling. Okay, John, you can add 2 points to your saving throw. That's essentially what it comes down to. And that completes setting up level 6. In relation to level 7, we're going to gain the ability of actually executing an additional font of magic or a 4th level spell. We're not gaining any new features, and we're not gaining any new proficiency points or cantrips. So I'm going to go through and I'll just close that now. Set this up. I want to minimize everything except the 4th level spell, and I'm going to drop this into place. Modify the font of magic, which is under sorcery. For now it's 7. And then I'm going to choose my spell. I'm going to do Dimension Door. Now, something that you might have noticed, and I intentionally did this, I dropped Dimension Door under this Sorcerer category. That's not really where it was supposed to go. Obviously, it was supposed to go under the level 4 grouping, out of convenience sake. Spells, for some reason, drop into a group that you've pre-created. Feats don't, and I'm not sure why. But it can sometimes be a pain in the butt. So if you've put a spell somewhere and you're not quite sure where it is, check your other categories just in case it accidentally got dropped into there. I just wanted to point that out here. So I'm going to remove that from there, and I'm going to redrop a Dimensional Door over a spell slot. And you'll see once you, even though I was trying to drop it into the level 2 slot there, or section there, it actually went into the level 4 one. So spells, when you try to drop them onto another spell level, will actually go through and create their own proper little category if it doesn't exist. I have no idea why it does that, but it does. And that completes everything we need to do for level 7. At level 8, we are going to gain our next ability score improvement, our increase in our font magic, and 1 additional known spell. So let's drop this into place. For level 8, we are going to go down to our Actions tab, modify font magic. I'm also going to choose a spell, and because I can now cast 4th level spells, I'm going to decide to choose one of those, and I'm going to go with Ice Storm this time. And then finally, I'm going to choose my ability score. So the last time I took 2 points and 2 abilities and modified each of them by 1 point. Today, I'm going to modify 1 ability score by 2 points with this particular one. And the reason I've done that is to showcase something that always confuses DMs and players. You may have noticed that I made the adjustment to my Constitution ability score. At the same time, it increased the total bonus points that I now have. It went from a +3 to a +4. That means I'm missing hit points. Right now I have 59 hit points. But those 59 hit points were generated in combination with my hit die and my actual +3 bonus that I had at the time. When by the rules of 5th edition, when you increase your Constitution ability score, and it therefore gives you an additional bonus point, you can now add those missing hit points to your character's total hit points. You do that by taking the bonus value, which in this case is a +1, the difference between the two values, +4 minus +3 equals +1, and multiply that by your current level. So in this case, I could actually give this character 8 additional hit points, giving this character, I believe, 67 hit points total. And that is everything we need to do for level 8. In relation to level 9, really all we're getting is our proficiency bonus increase, which we really don't have to do anything about, our font of magic increase, and finally our ability to cast level 5 spells. So let's drop this into place. Gonna go there, increase my font of magic to 9, and drop my first 5th level spell into place. Gonna go with hold magic. Okay, and that sets everything up for that particular character. And as always, you're gonna want to make sure that you go through and set these spells as prepared, although it doesn't really so much matter for Sorcerer. Generally, I as a DM like it to essentially be, I'm more comfortable with the fact that you're indicating that you've prepped that spell. Cantrips you don't need to do, but all the other spell levels you should, just to indicate that yes, I know that spell. That's all it really comes down to. And what that does is that actually completes our adjustment for level 9. At level 10, we're going to gain our next Metamagic feature point, our increase in our font magic usage. We are gaining our last increase in our cantrips, and we are gaining an additional understanding of a new spell. So let's take care of adding the level first. So that's level 10. We'll then go through and deal with the cantrip next. So let's just minimize all of the spells here. There we go. And which one do I not have? I'm going to go with Acid Splash. All right. You can always make sure that you've checked as to whether you've increased Font of Magic by the fact that it should equal your level, as I've already stated. So that takes care of that. And then finally, our next spell, which is a 5th level spell, or can be a 5th level spell, I should say. I'm going to go with Wall of Stone. And then we're going to talk about the Metamagic one. Well, we've already got 2 Metamagic capabilities here. All we really need to do is choose another one. So I'm going to go with Empowered Spell. So I'm just going to drag this into here so that it automatically drops into this group, and then modify the description here to indicate that it's empowered. Empowered spell. There. And that'll automatically organize it so that it's alphabetically sorted here. Now when I actually go through and I say, hey, DM, I'm going to empower my spell, I just click on that. If they go, sorry, what does that do? Just click on and drag that into place, or simply just drag this into place so that they can click it. And that will automatically load it up on their screen so that they can see the contents of that ability and they can read through it just to make sure that you're using it legitimately. Some DMs will just not know what that does, and some DMs are always meticulous at reading everything before they allow a player to do something. And that actually completes everything that we need to do at level 10. In relation to level 11, we are gaining an increase in our font utilization. Weird way to say that, but whatever. And we are gaining our next spell level, which in this case is 6th level. We do gain a new spell, but you will notice that after this, we now only gain a spell slot, or new spell, I should say, every other level. So at level 11, let's take a look at our spell. So let's drop that into place, increase our font of magic. I wish you could just set this so that it was equal to your level, and it would automatically set this up to be an option to say select level, and then it would automatically figure the rest of it out. That way you don't have to worry about doing that. Be nice. I'm not sure if it's even possible to do, but anyway. Level 6 spells. I'm going to go with Disintegrate. Okay. And that actually completes everything for level 11. For level 12, we are gaining our next ability score improvement, and I will show a feat here and actually apply it, as well as our font of magic increase. We are not gaining any new spells of knowledge, so we don't get to choose one. So it's just focus on our ability score improvement and our font of magic increase. So let's drop this into place. Go to Sorcerer and increase our font of magic. And I'm going to go here. And let's have a look. So in this case, I'm actually going to choose Lucky because I want to showcase a little bit of a setup that you can actually make use of here. So I'm going to drop Lucky into place, and that'll automatically drop it into this upper feats section, if you will. But it won't actually set it up for use in any way, shape, or form. To do that, what you need to do is drop it into place on your Actions tab, and then adjust this to the feats category. And what you want to do is set it up for an X number of uses over a long rest, and that is 3 uses per day. Now what will happen is that you now have a luck point that you can actually tick off whenever you use it. So you click that, it will automatically say that you're using that particular spell, and then you cast or re-roll or force a re-roll on the target that you've chosen to make that re-roll, as long as they're attacking you. And that's it. That is how you set up Lucky. And that also completes everything for level 12. So let's move on to the next level. So level 13, we're going to see our font of magic increase. We're going to gain our next spell level, in the sense that we can now cast 7th level spells. And that is literally all we're going to gain outside of the hit points that we're gaining for each level that we acquire. So let's drop this into place. Go to Actions, Modify. Oops, I'm not sure why that went there. Modify this to be 13. And then I'm going to choose a level 7 spell. And anyone else who has watched this will know which one I'm going to select. I love that Delayed Blast Fireball. I don't know why, I just love it so much. And that completes everything for level 13. So level 14 is going to see our next Sorcerous Origin feature come into play, an increase in our font of magic. We have already gained our proficiency bonus increase here. I think that happened in the previous level, so I forgot to point that out. But we are not gaining any new spells or spell slots. So let's drop this into place. Put level 14 there, and then activate our increase for fonts of use, fonts of magic use. We don't need to worry about the spells, but let's take a look at Controlled Chaos. So with Controlled Chaos, you're actually gaining the ability to partially control any casting on the wild magic table. And what that means is that if you were asked by the DM to now go ahead and roll, because you rolled a 1 here as opposed to an 18, I was kind of hoping a 1 would come up, but anyway, then what you do is you click on your Wild Surge table and you roll twice. And you get to choose which one you want to use. So you regain your lowest level expended spell slot. So if I'd gone through and cast, let's say 3, there we go, 3 first level spells, I would gain 1 back. That would be the first option. The second one, you become invisible for the next minute. During that time, other creatures can't hear you, And the invisibility ends if you attack or cast a spell. I think I would take the invisibility capability here. I don't know why, I just would. But anyway, that's what Controlled Chaos allows you to do. Now, Controlled Chaos is still not linking in here properly. Neither is Ben Luck for that matter, so I'm going to drop both of those into there. Now, this is a wild magic feature, so it's going to need to be categorized down there. Unfortunately, when you drag it into here, it's always going to drop up there. Magic. Okay, that throws that down there. Now, I'm linking this here because you're going to want to tell the DM that you're using it. And guess what? There's no limitation. Any time you are required to roll against the wild magic surge table, you get to roll twice. That's the benefit of being level 14. So you'll want to make sure that when the DM calls out for that roll, you say, I'm using my wild magic surge. They go, wait, what? Hang on. Here you go. Sorry, not wild magic surge. My apologies. I'm using my controlled chaos. They go, wait, what? Drop that into place. They can see it. And then make your rolls. And obviously the rolls will show up in the chat, so you can actually go through and choose which of the ones that you want to make use of. And that completes everything that you need to do for level 14. So level 15 sees really just our ability to cast level 8 spells here and our font of magic increase. So I'm going to drop that into place. Switch over, minimize that, modify fonts of magic usage, and then look for a level 8 spell. And drop that into place. Incendiary Cloud sounds fun. And that's it. That's all you have to do for level 15. At level 16, we are gaining another ability score improvement and our font of magic increase. We are not gaining any additional spell slots, so we don't need to worry about that. So let's just focus on the ability score improvement in the level itself. Okay, that applies to that. Modify font of magic use to match level. And all I am going to do in this particular case is raise my wisdom score up by 2 points. Just because I can. That's literally all I'm doing it for. And that completes everything for level 16. Level 17 sees our last Metamagic capability come into play, as well as our font of magic use, if you will. In addition to that, level 17 also sees us with the ability to now cast up to level 9 spells. So this is one of those few cases where, in the case of the Sorcerer anyway, where we are actually gaining a feature at the same time that we're gaining a new spell level once past our earlier levels. Let's drop this into place. Deal with our font of magic increase first. And I'm now going to choose a level 9 spell. I'll take Wish, even though it's not as useful as it has been in the past, but just to give you a little bit of a different selection there. And then our Metamagic capability. So let's go up here, grab this, and drag and drop that there so that's ready to go. And I'm going to do Careful Spell. Just because I've got some significant, careful, 1L, yeah, 1L. Area of effect damaging spells here. I want to make sure that my party members are going to survive. And that is everything we need to do for level 17. At level 18, we are gaining our last Sorcerous origin feature, so that is going to be Spell Bombardment. Let's move that up here. Font of Magic point increase. And we will not be gaining any new spells. So we are now done with our spell sheet. So let's just focus on the last few levels for the things that we need to deal with. So let's drop our Sorcerer into place. Increase our font of magic points. And then look at Spell Bombardment. So this feature gives you the ability to essentially amplify the damage that you're able to do. And what I mean by that is that, let's say Let's pick Incendiary Cloud here. So damage, 10d6, sorry, 10d8 of damage. Only one of those rolled the maximum possible value that die could actually do. But that's good because I can now take that damage, or sorry, that die. When you roll damage for a spell and roll the highest number possible on any of the dice, choose one of those dice and roll it again and add that roll to the damage. So right now I'm doing a total of 48 points of damage. Well, I get to roll another die here and add 3 additional points to that total for a total of 51 points of damage. To actually apply that damage, you literally should just be able to drag and drop it onto the actual character. Now I'm just going to confirm that that worked on the Dungeon Master screen. So right now that Wraith has 24 points of damage. Yes. So if I drop that onto the token here, that doesn't increase, but if I do it as the DM, that increases. So you can see now that the damage has been applied. So the Dungeon Master still has to apply that extra damage. You as the player can't. I wonder if I do that there. No, didn't apply. I was hoping they added that feature, but they didn't. Anyway, so that gives you an idea as to what you would do in this particular case. But you're going to want to actually tell the Dungeon Master that you're making use of it, which is why I've added it to the Wild Magic option here. So that you can just go click, I'm using that, re-roll your 1d8, tell the Dungeon Master to apply that extra X number of points of damage. And that actually completes everything we need to do for our class specialization. That is the last improvement, or feature rather, that we're getting because of our class specialization. The next two levels are literally just Sorcerer feats and abilities that we're gaining. So I'm going to close that as well. So at level 19, we are now gaining our final ability score improvement, our second to last Font of Magic point, and no additional spells or spell slots. So I'm going to drop this into place. Go here, minimize that, expand out Sorcerer, and modify that particular total count. Now our ability score improvement, I am literally just once again, for the sake of brevity, going to increase my intelligence. I'm going to increase that to a 13. So that way all of my ability scores at least have a +1 bonus applied to it. That way all of my skills have some sort of bonus applied to it. And all of my saving throws have some sort of bonus applied to it. Just for kicks. And that completes everything for level 19. So our final level will see us gain our last Font of Magic increase. We have already received our final point of our proficiency bonuses. And we will see our Sorcerous Restoration feature come through. So let's drop this into place. Go and modify this for the last time. And you can see here that we now have 20 uses that we can make use of that here. And this is going to tie directly into Sorcerous Restoration. So let's pop this open here. So at 20th level, you regain 4 expended sorcery points whenever you finish a short rest. So you can't modify this because you're still limited to 20 points daily with this catch. So if you take, let's say you've burned through that many uses of your Font of Magic throughout the course of the day. If you now take a short rest, you will gain 4 of those back for use that you can continue to do later on. Now let's say I burnt through some additional uses here. I now have 3 remaining points. I take another short rest. I can gain 4 of those back. I will only regain everything back when a long rest is executed. So if I go over to here and execute a long rest, all of the point usage has now returned. So that is what this needs to work as. I have made suggestions in the previous video where you split it out so that you have maybe 4 fonts of magic per, and you set it up so that it's a short rest or a long rest or something along those lines. But the flaw with that is if you have 5 of these set aside, they're all set for short rest, you're going to gain all 20 points back. This is the better option to use. You just have the one reference for font of magic. You burn through your uses as you go through and progress throughout the course of the day, and then if you take a short rest, it's incumbent on you as the player to remember that you can now regain 4 of them back. And that's what that essentially gives you the ability to do at level 20. And with that actually completes the last level for the Wild Mage branch of the Sorcerer. I wish to thank you for taking the time to watch this particular video. I hope you found it informative and useful to familiarizing yourself with Fantasy Grounds in general, and that you had fun in the process. If you found the video useful and you liked the content of the particular video, go ahead and click that like button to let me know. And if you have any questions specific to the topic covered by this particular video, or just have some comments in general, please feel free to post something in the comments section, and I will do my best to respond to any questions that are asked. Additionally, I do release content quite regularly, and it's generally specific to Fantasy Grounds or 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons at this time. So if you'd like to be notified when new videos come out, go ahead and subscribe and click the notification bell to ensure that notification is sent to you when I release a new video.